Hey everyone, welcome. We are studying Psalm 54 today. It's kind of a short one, only 7 verses. I think we should be able to move pretty quickly. It was once again written by David, so I think that's 4 in a row. Do you think David will bring back his streak of over 30 in a row? I'm not so sure, but this one was written by David. And as far as our New Testament references today, I'm not aware of any New Testament references back to Psalm 54. By the way, if you want this outline that you're seeing on the screen, you can download it on our website at tobelikechrist.com. That brings us to our themes section, and we have 2 again today. First one, you can't always trust the people around you. That's kind of a depressing theme, but David experiences that when in the context in which we'll talk about in a second. Number 2, the friendship of God is superior to the friendship of any man. So even if men betray you, if God's on your side, that's really what you need. Okay, definitions. The first one is one we looked at yesterday, and it's maskil. Maskil, the exact meaning of the term is unknown. Some people think that it's some kind of a musical indicator talking about, or to specify the way the psalm's supposed to be presented. Other people think that it's a term that indicates that this is a psalm that is supposed to impart wisdom to those who are hearing it. Then we do have a new one today, and that is a free will offering. Now, this won't be new if you were with us for the books of Exodus and Leviticus, but that was a while ago now. So a free will offering, it appears in verse 6 of chapter 54. Under God's law for the Israelites, the law that God gave to Moses, the Israelite people were required to make certain sacrifices for certain reasons, certain times of the year. A free will offering was a sacrifice that was made to God that wasn't required, but that the offerer made of his own free will. And that could be for a number of reasons. Maybe they had received a great blessing and they wanted to worship God in thankfulness. Maybe they had a prayer that they really needed answered and they wanted to offer a sacrifice to God. So again, it was an offering that was made that wasn't required, but a person gave freely. So once again today, we have a psalm that has a little bit of background to it, a little bit of context that's given to us. When David was hiding from King Saul, he was betrayed by the Ziphites. That's a group of people who lived around the wilderness of Ziph. That's how they get their name. He was actually betrayed by the Ziphites twice. If you remember, back in 1 Samuel 23 and 1 Samuel 23 and 1 Samuel 26, the Ziphites reported on David's location when he was hiding in the wilderness. And so if you remember, just a little bit of background here, King Saul was the king of Israel. He was anointed by God originally, but he had disobeyed God, and God had anointed David to be the next king. The kingdom was going to be taken from Saul. Well, Saul was mad about that, and he was trying to kill David so that David couldn't get the throne. But God was protecting David. David writes about his experience during these times in this psalm, in Psalm 54. So the Ziphites betray David to Saul. As I mentioned, pretty short chapter, just 7 verses, pretty straightforward chapter. When the Ziphites betrayed David, he called out to the Lord for help and for protection, and that's what this psalm is all about. King Saul, as we mentioned, wanted to kill David, and the Ziphites were spying on David and revealing his location to Saul and informing Saul's men. David prayed that he was going to be delivered from these ruthless and these godless men. David couldn't trust the people that were around him, the people in the countryside around him. He didn't know who was his ally, who wasn't his ally, but he knew that he could trust God, and that's why he calls out to God. He says, quote, "Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the upholder of my life," in verse 4. David was confident that God was going to deal with his enemies and that eventually they would receive what they deserved for this crime against him, because David hadn't done anything wrong, and David was the Lord's anointed man, and the Ziphites and Saul were trying to kill him. David was ensured of victory, and he tells the Lord that he will worship him with free will offerings, because David is so confident that God is going to bring him through this, and we know the rest of the story. God does bring him through it. Okay, so let's talk application now. I think a pretty simple one today, but a very encouraging one, and especially for people who are in tough situations with the people around them. One of the greatest blessings of being a follower of God is that we know that we're always going to have somebody to be on our side. You'll encounter situations in your life when you can't trust the people around you, and those situations always feel terrible. When the people around you don't have your best interest in mind, they don't really care about what happens to you. They're really just cared about themselves or other people. There are going to be times, maybe even when your friends betray you. Some people are in really sad situations where they can't even trust their own family to care about them and to seek their good. But as Christians, we always have somebody who we can trust and someone who has promised to be there for us. David knew that God was always going to be his friend. And if God was his only friend, then everything was going to be all right for him. Jesus says in verse 13 of John 15, "Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends." Jesus cares about you so much that he'll die for you. And if everyone else betrays you and all you have is Jesus, you have all you'll ever need.